All right, and now we're back here with lesson number 2 of session 5. We're going through the top 10 takeaways from our communication session so far. These are the top 10 big ideas of how to create our best in our relationships through communication. We talked about how communication is the most enjoyable part of a relationship, also the most frustrating, and that is determined initially by modeling, but later by skill development. Number 2, we said our differences make our fundamental assumptions wrong. We all see the world through different filters, through different eyes. We need to pay attention to that. Number 3, we said defensiveness is an enemy of great conversation, so we need to avoid it and look out for it. Let's be aware of how the male need for competency, for the feeling of you can do it, and the female need for acceptance, to know that they're needed. That plays into that whole situation. Let's be aware of that because defensiveness is an enemy. Number 4, we asked, are we even playing in the same field? We have to ask in our communications, ask ourselves, are we on the same side of logic and emotion? Because if you're in different ballparks there, it's not good. Number 5, we talked about how to keep the flow of meeting going through mutual respect, recognizing the need for that, and mutual purpose. And then lastly, in our previous lesson in session 5 here, we finished off with number 6, talked about the 4 values of great relationships. Okay, so now number 7, let's jump into some new material. These are the last 3 of the top 10 takeaways in communication. Number 7, how to restore safety. Last 4. How to restore safety in a conversation. How to restore safety in a conversation. Remember, we talked that the relationships or conversations stall when all of a sudden one or more of the people feel like it's not safe to be there. And so how to restore safety in a conversation. And really what we said is that you have to step outside the conversation. It seems to be kind of like a general theme over how to repair a conversation, to step outside of it and then to do things that are going to repair that conversation that made it unsafe. You can apologize, you can create some humor if that's appropriate, and if you share a common joke or a common kind of sense of humor, you can do it with humor. You can take that person's influence. Remember talking about these things where you say, you know what, I think you're right about that point. You know, even though you might disagree, come from very different worlds on the main topic, you can agree on a certain point, just kind of accept influence. And so we have to know how to restore safety in a conversation, because if a conversation is really going anywhere of substance, it will get into areas that are unsafe, that the other person feels judged, or competency or acceptance is at stake. All right, so how to restore safety in a conversation? We have to make our communication style safe. Do you remember we talked about that? How safe are we as communicators? You know, do the people in our lives, the people that we talk to, think that we're safe, or do they never know kind of who's going to show up at work or what person they're going to get in any given day? Are we safe? Are we consistent? Number 8, in conflict, and we're starting to review some of our conflict sessions now. In conflict, we need to be aware of our styles and our skill. When conflict happens in communication, we have to be aware of our style. Remember the different styles we talked about? You can withdraw. You can just yield and just kind of let everybody else have their own way, or let the other person always have their own way. Or you can fight to win, where you're the one that has to get their own way. Do you remember that? We have to be aware of what our style is and how we're coming across. And again, to step outside of that conversation to say, how am I coming across here? Like, how is this looking? What would it be like to be the other person in the room right now? To be aware of our styles, and then also to be aware of our skill level in conflict. Remember what we said, the quality of a relationship long time will be determined by the level of skill that you can handle conflict with, because conflict will come, and yet the quality won't necessarily be determined by the good times. It'll be determined by the times that could potentially drag it down to a lower level. And so in conflict, be aware of your styles and your skill. You can get better at handling conflict. You can get better. In the book Crucial Conversations, which I mentioned before, they talk about how in conflict we are kind of biologically wired to fail. You know, in conflict, there's a greater blood supply to our flight, you know, kind of syndrome, or fight syndrome. Like, we get kind of on edge. We can get physically on edge. Have you ever been like in a board meeting or like in a tense kind of conversation, and you're feeling like physically agitated, like there's adrenaline flowing? You got to understand about yourself, like, that's not helping you think, right? That's not helping you bring your heart to the situation and stay open. All that's doing is serving to kind of take blood flow away from your brain and potentially help you, or influence you to say something that you're going to regret, or to do something, or to be silent in a place where you should have spoken up. And so we've got to be aware of how we're reacting in conflict and just get better skills at it, because we can do that. All right, number 9. The number one requirement for listening and communicating well. We talked about this in one of our previous sessions here. The number one requirement for listening and communicating well is this. You ready? Humility. The number one requirement for listening and communicating well is humility. This isn't yielding and just letting the other person have their own way. This isn't withdrawing and say, I feel like really fighting right now and yelling some choice words, but I'm just not going to. I'm going to zip my lip. That is not, that's not humility. Humility is genuinely from the heart saying, I put your deal above my deal. I choose in this situation to put what's on your plate above what's on my plate. To care more about you than I'm caring about me. Humility gives you access into a relationship, into a conversation. All right, so the number one requirement for listening and communicating well is humility. I want you to remember, out of the book of Philippians, that this is the quality that Jesus exhibited, right? Ultimate humility, right? He did not consider himself to be equal with God, but he became one of us. He became as a servant. And of course, the end story there is great exaltation, right? It's pride that comes before fall. It's humility that God exalts, right? It's, biblically speaking, the Bible says that God resists the proud, right? But he gives grace to the humble. And so the number one requirement for better listening and for communicating well is humility, right? To put other people first and to genuinely do that. I want to finish this top 10 here tonight by talking about number 10, the North Star in all your conversations. That the bullseye on the target in all your conversations is this, that your relationships are the most important, okay? To prioritize your relationships. So the North Star is, I've got to talk, I've got to act, I've got to speak, I've got to handle my communication so that the relationship is preserved. It's like it's more important than your own feeling of safety. It's more important than your own need to be right. It's more important than when you're talking about children, it's more important than the reputation that they might be shining on you as a parent, right? The number one thing is to talk towards, to parent towards, to communicate towards, in a marriage to act towards preserving and nurturing the relationship. And I say that and say it so emphatically because in communication, it's really easy for all kinds of things to suddenly become more important, right? How I feel at the end of the day, what I want out of a particular situation, my opinion about something that really matters, that I feel that I know better, more about. Like I said, with kids, trying to protect, as parents, you're trying to protect your own sort of reputation, or you want them to represent you well. You don't want them to, you want them to do what's right or lawful, or, the relationship's more important than their obedience even, right? The relationship is the North Star. It is the goal. And so to keep that in mind and to communicate accordingly. So there we have it, the top 10 takeaways. I want to go from number 7 again. Number 7, just to kind of quickly review, to restore safety in a conversation, to be aware of how safe you are and how safe a communication setting is, and to restore safety as needed. Number 8, in conflict, to be aware of your styles and your skill in handling conflict, because you can get better and you don't have to have the same style that was modeled to you. Number 9, the number one requirement for listening and communication well is humility. Jesus grinds this into us, right? Humility is the most important requirement for it. And then number 10, the North Star in all our conversations, is that relationship is the most important. All right, so we're at the top 10 takeaways from our communication sessions. Any one of these, yet alone all 10 together, could revolutionize most of our relationship settings and the communications that we have with the people that we care about the most. I want to spend the rest of the time here in this session just talking about 3 ways to apply what we've learned, all right? So we've got the summary here, top 10 takeaways from our last 5 sessions together. These are the big ideas right here. I want to further kind of break things down in terms of a practical way by saying, there's really overall 3 things that we can do here, that we can go out of this room, that we can go away from these sessions, and we can apply for the betterment of our relationships. 3 ways to apply what we've learned. Number 1, or A, step outside the conversation and see what needs to change. This is the one big idea that's probably come up in, I don't know, maybe all of the sessions, and certainly this review as we've gone over it here, is this thing that we can learn to do. When we're in a communication, where we're having a conversation, we can have what's actually going on, what we're actually saying, and what we're actually hearing. And then if we're present in the conversation, we're not like multitasking with texting somebody else at the same time or trying to watch TV at the same time. Like if we're really present in a conversation, we can have this kind of mental review of how things are going. We do this all the time, don't we, right? We've got what's actually being said, and then we've got the things that we wish we could say. Isn't that right? Whether good or bad. Isn't that true? We've got what's being said by that person, and then this internal dialogue that's kind of saying, you know what, I think they're afraid. You know what, I think that they are just insecure about this particular topic. Isn't that right? We don't say it like, hey, I think you're insecure about this topic, but we're thinking it. Isn't that right? Here's what we need to do. We need to step outside the conversation enough to address what we're hearing, what we're sensing, what we're feeling, what we're thinking about behind the scenes, and then as appropriate, bring that back into the conversation and repair the conversation. Change our own style, right? Learn that see that we're not doing something well and fix it. Apologize if we've broken mutual respect, if we've said something that's disrespectful, or we've suddenly changed purpose, or we've been duplicitous in how we entered the conversation and where we are now, to own up to those things and to begin to change them, all right? So to suffice it to say that we have this internal dialogue going on at the same time, we've got to learn how to take from that and to bring it forward. Listen, I don't think there's so many conversations where I've known something, either spiritually, but most often just, I'm pretty sure this is my chance to apologize right here, you know? Or, you know what, I think I said that a little bit too harshly. Right? And I want to take it back and I want to address it, but I don't. Why? I've got my pride on the line, right? I think I'm making headway in terms of making my point. I think, right? And we justify not doing it. But if we will do this, step outside the conversation long enough to say, you know what? It might seem off the wall, but I'm just going to do this. And we say, you know what? I just, you know, as we're talking here, I just got this feeling like I've been coming across like all I care about is, I just want you to know that at the end of the day, no matter how this works out, I really care about you, and I really care about this relationship. I just felt I needed to say that. And then boom, something's restored in the communication. The meaning begins to flow again. The person opens up. Can you see that? But if we ignore that opportunity, it just continues to go stale, and we kind of shake hands at the end of the day, and that's kind of it, you know, instead of this magic of what can happen in great communication. Or to be there in a conversation, and you're kind of like, you know what, I think this person is super insecure. And so you step back outside and you say, you know what, I just want to say this. I really believe that you and we can do this together. I really believe this is going to end well, right? And you address what you're sensing, and then you say, so with that in mind, what's the next best thing that we could do here about this problem, right? And all of a sudden you've got their buy-in, and they're yielding to your influence. All right. So you guys get that? Okay. So to step outside the relationship. Here's another way to step outside, to talk about your talking. You know, if there's something that I can encourage you to do, especially as couples, is to talk about your talking, right? They say in entrepreneurship, and when you start a business, you can spend so much time working in the business that you never work on the business, right? This is classic Michael Gerber with his email. He says that you can be so busy working in the business that you never work on the business, right? So you're so busy servicing clients that you never look at how you service clients and what those systems are that enable that to do that better, right? Okay. Same with our communication. We can be so busy in our conversations that we never step out, never look back and say, let's talk about how that went down last night when we had that argument. You know, that date where we just kind of sat there and stared at each other? What were you thinking about? You know, like, how come we can't break through that sort of like space between us? Like, what's going on? Let's talk about our talking. All right. Another way to do it is in the moment to ask yourself how things are going and how you can make course corrections. Doing these things, talking about your talking, in the moment, making course corrections, it accelerates the learning curve from unconscious incompetence. In other words, blindly doing the wrong things in communication. You don't even know you're doing it. You're just like a bull in a china shop. You're just creating messes in communication where they don't need to be made. You're even unconscious about it, to unconscious competence. This is where we want to get, where we're kind without having to necessarily choose it. We just are. where we're loving, where we're humble, where we're putting other people first, where we're stepping outside the conversation and repairing it just as an automatic way of conversation, right? That's the way that we want to be. It accelerates this learning curve because we're all in one. That's why we're in relationships, isn't that right? Accelerates the learning curve from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. You know what? I was just in a potentially very volatile situation, and it just all went really, really well. And I wasn't even necessarily having to choose every single step of the way. I just did it unconsciously. It just worked. We can all get there. We can all do that. Yeah, that's why we're in the learning curve. All right. Here's the question to ask with this, guys. This three ways to apply. Here's the question. Who do you need to do this with? And how could you start that conversation? To talk about your talking. Who do you need to do this with? Maybe you need to say, who do I need to do this with the most or more? And how could you start that conversation? Mary and I, we oftentimes, my wife and I will go out on a date just to do this. And, you know, we might have had a spattering of communications. And we'll go out on a date and say, you know, this date is to talk about how we talk to each other, right? And that will be the topic on the table. You know, you can do it that way. You can write a note. You can walk into your boss and say, you know what, boss, I don't have any particular issue. I just want to talk about how we're doing this or how our conversations are going. So who do you need to have this conversation with? And how could you start that conversation? All right, 3 ways to apply what we've learned. This is the big one, right? Just step outside and see changes need to be made. Next one, changes of heart. Changes of heart. What I mean by this is that if there's a superficial change in the way that you're communicating, it'll probably just stay superficial, and the change probably won't even last. Because great changes happen from the heart. When you realize, you know what, I have been wrong here in the way I've come across, and I'm apologizing, I don't want to be that way anymore, and you turn from it, right? Heart changes, right? Changes of the heart, where you just haven't maybe put value in other people in your life, in coworkers, or in, you know, in a boss situation, maybe even family. You've just kind of written people off, or you've just kind of, no wonder the conversations are stilted or stagnating or don't go well, is because there's part of your heart that's kind of died towards it. And God's Spirit, you know, He can help you with this and help you apply this where it needs to be applied. Even in a marriage, there's part of your heart that can kind of like die. Just sort of like, you know what? I don't think this expectation is ever going to be fulfilled, and so I'm going to stop wanting this. Isn't that right? So changes of heart, like, I want this part of me to live again. I want to be safe in this environment. I want, you know, that the part of your heart there to change and to shift. We control our heart, right? A great statement is this. I think I heard it from Rex Crane first. He said, you are not what you feel, you are what you choose. What a great statement, hey. And so even though all the feelings to go a certain way might be pressing in on me, as a human being with an independent, free spirit, empowered by the Spirit of God, I can still choose to do the right thing and to say the right thing and to move my heart in the right place. Even though all hell maybe has come against me and maybe I've been really hurt by life and by things, I can still move my heart into a place of acceptance and a place of forgiveness. All right, so changes of heart. Write this in this blank here. To lead here is to lead in every area. When a change happens in the heart, a change will happen out in your relationships, out in your life, in almost every area. So to lead here with your own heart, not just your skill development, but your heart. To lead here is to lead in every area. Let me say the converse is also true. To not lead here is to sign up for more of the same. You can put that in that next blank in those quotation marks. To lead here is to sign up for more of the same. Right? You just change something on the surface. You know, you just kind of listen to some of these principles and we're just kind of like, we should try that someday or whatever, but nothing really changes. We just sign up for more of the same. But I believe that for myself and for people that are listening and taking this in, that some of these sessions, some of these big ideas, they really represent an opportunity to do something different and to have a change of heart about it. Here's a question to ask. What is an internal heart shift that you could make that would facilitate the flow of your communications? What is an internal heart shift that you could make that would facilitate the flow of your communications? It's a good question to sit there for a while and think about, isn't it? Okay, if I was going to change my heart towards somebody, about communication itself, about my role in it, about what I could do about it, about my respect of other people, if I could change my heart, what would it be like in order to facilitate the flow of communication better? All right, and then the last one that I want to share tonight, and then we'll be finished this session, is this. See, keep learning and growing in communication skills. Keep learning and growing in communication skills. And I say those learning and growing, I don't say them to be redundant. I say, you know what, we can learn a lot from like books and that kind of thing, right? We can learn. We can come to sessions like this. We can review sessions. Even online, some of this stuff is archived, or that many other people have done websites on communication. You can buy little mini courses on communication. You can learn a lot. You can kind of like get a lot of information. But then it's time to grow, right? It's time to put that application to work. It's time to apply what we've learned. Okay, and that's what I mean by growing. So we've got to keep learning and keep growing in communication skills. Learning via observation. You can write some of these down. You can observe what works, what doesn't work. Mary and I like to do this with movies sometimes. We'll watch movies and we'll watch couples on movies, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Used that as an illustration this last Sunday. We'll watch movies and we'll be like, okay, so about the way that they interacted, not necessarily that movie, but we'll say about the way that they interacted. What about that do we like or do we not like? I'm thinking about other movies now. What about that do we like? What about that do we not like? What do we want to incorporate as something that we would like to do? Like, what do you think he felt in that situation? What about her, right? And we'll just kind of like talk about some of that dialogue because we're observing. You guys don't know this, and y'all go to the church that we started, but oftentimes Mary and I will observe other couples, right, that we're like friends with or whatever. We'll be like, so what did you think about that? And how did you feel about that person? And, like, do you like the way that he said that, about her? And, and do you think she felt honored by that? Or do you think she felt, whatever, right? We'll talk. Now we're watching you, right? So, okay, best behavior. But that's how we do. We learn from each other. Isn't that right? We learn. And so we'll talk about it. So observe. Observe other people. Learning with books. You can buy great books on communication. I'm reading a great one right now, just rereading it right now. And it is called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. Fierce Conversations, excellent book. Just learning so much from it, So I recommend that to you. There's books on communication, Crucial Conversations, I've mentioned that. Love and Respect is a great one for marriages. If you want to, you can borrow any of these from me, actually. I have them. So learning via observation, books, and learning, of course, by talking about it, right? By sitting down and having conversations about your talking. Here's how we grow. Via real time. Practice in your communications. Practice in the low stakes kind of situations and relationships so that when the stakes are high, you know what to do. Practice. Practice using these principles. See how they work. Watch them work. Learn how they could be done better. So practice in real time. The challenges, the communication challenges that you're in front of right now, we all have them with different people in our lives, the different topics or the different people that just, are not as easy as the other ones, all right? Those are the ones that you want to embrace those challenges and engage them, right? There's conversations that I'm sure that we're all putting off that we need to have with certain people, right? Conversations about certain, we put them off, hope they'll look after themselves or whatever. Go into those challenges equipped, like learn some stuff, go in equipped and embrace those challenges, right? Come out and evaluate. How did I do? What can I do better next time? How did that go? Evaluate, right? So challenges, and then your desire to improve. Your desire to improve communication. You can grow in relationships when you sit there and in your heart you say, I still want to get better at this. I want this relationship to get better. I want to have, a boss that I'm really on the same page with, coworkers that we're really moving and going and applying our teamwork, that sort of thing, all right? So growing real time with practice, challenges, and your desires for improvement. Here's a question for you with this last item. What resources can I access to help me continue to improve in this area? What resources can I access to help me to improve in this area and make the rubber meet the road? When will I do so? to buy a book and I'm going to read a book by the end of the month on communication, or this quarter, or this year, I'm going to get 3 classics on communication, read them. So what resources are you going to access, and when will you do so? Most books, you can just buy the audio of them and have someone read them to you right on your way to work or while you're working out or whatever, right? I mean, it's a great way to go through material and just to kind of have that continually improve because we can. All right, so 3 ways to apply what we've learned. Step outside the conversation to see what needs to change. Please take this away from these sessions, that you can do that and you can get better and better at it. Changes of heart. If there's anything that God's putting on your heart that you just feel impressed, you know what? I do need to change that. I do need to address that in my own self. Then go ahead and do that. And then lastly, let's all keep learning. And let's all keep growing in our communication skills. Let's be the best communicators, the greatest conversationalists that we can possibly be. Let's do it together. Thanks. That's the end of our communication sessions. If you have any questions on any of this material, please go ahead and email me at rowan@gatewayvictory.com. That's ROWAN @gatewayvictory.com on May 4th, which will be our next session. In 2 weeks, we're going to address these questions, or the most common questions. We're going to go ahead and address them. We're going to be live. We're going to take questions from around the room as well. But our next session is a question and answer session. We'll be broadcasting it on the evening of May 4th. Please email us your questions. And any other comments, let us know what you think and how we did. Rowan@gatewayvictory.com. Thanks.